And we thought about this presentation, now my second presentation, as an introduction to tomorrow. So we are starting to think about the various facets of fertility control and what you should start to think about if you are asked as an expert to run a project on fertility control, if somebody has decided that fertility control is a good idea for a species. So let's start from this. How many is too many? Who decides how many is too many? We probably all agree that a rat in my kitchen is one too many, a wild boar in a schoolyard, not a good idea. 3 bears in my village, some people might decide that they're not too many, but we're talking about individuals here. And when we talk about individuals, there's very little that you can do in terms of fertility control. However, let's start thinking about something else. 50 pigeons on Notre Dame, are they too many? Non-native squirrels in my local park, are they too many? These are probably too many, and these are probably too many in the green boxes, mainly because we can see the effects of these animals. But who decides whether there are too many or not and how to manage is important. So I'm now going to give you an example of a couple of case studies, and I've chosen species that I'm absolutely sure nobody in this room has worked on. So they are hypothetical species, and you will understand why. And I'm going to talk about the challenges and the opportunities and what we have to think about when we want to apply fertility control. Unicorns. So this is the biology of unicorns, that many of you will know. The issue is that there's overgrazing. We need population control. However, they are an iconic species, and they're also protected by law. So let's highlight the thing that we should start thinking about and that you should have noticed in this slide. The living groups. So as Ronnie was saying, what if you contracept the alpha male, the stallion? Will all the other males start reproducing? Because the stallion fathers all the newborn. The good news is that we have a very consistent proportion that every year reproduces, 70 to 80% of the females. That's good because we can predict what will happen. However, these animals live a long time. If they live 30 years, it means also that even if you contracepted all of them today, you have to wait a long time before you see effects on the population. You also have to consider that they are iconic, so a lot of people will not want you to touch unicorns, and they're protected by law. So can you use the contraceptive that you want to use? Can you import it? Can you deliver it? Second case, wind lemmings. Wind lemmings are a bit different from unicorns for many, many reasons. So I've put the biology of wind lemmings here. And the issue is a population outbreak is expected. And they will have major impact on crops during the outbreak. The key point here is that they're native. So if they're native, we don't want to exterminate them. We want to keep them, and we want to lower their impact. They live in pairs in burrows. That's good for us because, as Jens was demonstrating, we might consider that we can put the contraceptive, the oral contraceptive, in a burrow, assuming that we have an oral contraceptive. The proportion of animals that give birth is a problem for us because we have a very variable proportion, so very difficult to try to predict what will happen. They also have 3 to 6 pups, 3 liters per year, so they can have demographic explosion. The good news is that the lifespan is short, which means that if we apply fertility control to a large proportion of the population, we will see an effect pretty quickly, unlike the unicorns. However, they are the main prey for several carnivores and raptors. What happens when we put a contraceptive in an animal that is a main prey? So these are some of the things that we would like you to consider tomorrow when we ask you to be in group and discuss, because these are all things that will come up in various projects. We created a decision tree for field application of fertility control. There are various versions of these, various papers on these. I can point you to a paper. Effectively, this assumes that stakeholders have been informed about fertility control and they are supportive. So we are ready. Somebody has asked us, can we use fertility control on the species? And we are ready to go because there is public support for it. Where do we go from here? I would say that we start by looking at, is the contraceptive effect proven on that species, and we know whether there are side effects. And by proven, I mean I want to see, before even thinking about going to the field, I want to see a few papers in reputable journals that show me that given this contraceptive to the animals of my species, decreases their fertility or makes them infertile, and it doesn't have major side effect or side effect that I don't want. Only then I can then think about the field. So if these data are not available, I would strongly suggest everybody in this room not to use their contraceptive and maybe to do some tests in captivity with your species. If the data are available and you're convinced by the evidence and you have spoken to the expert about it, experts that have done these trials, you can then start modeling. You model the impact on population, because the modeling will tell you what is the target, the proportion of the population that I want to achieve, and how long will it take me to go down to the target numbers. And then you start thinking about feasibility. Not a lot of people think about feasibility. Can we import and use the contraceptive? I have worked with colleagues where we started a project, we were very happy, went on for a year, and then the project stopped because we didn't have, or we were told at that point that we didn't have all the documents to import and use a specific contraceptive in the country. And so this could really, really delay you. Can the aims be achieved within time and budget? Again, time and budget means many, many more things. Means also, do we have people? Do we know that some people are available that will trap and anesthetize the animal if that's needed? Enough animals? Can we reach the proportion that we want in the time that we want with the budget, with all the unknowns that are millions? I used to say to people, I've worked enough in this field to be an expert in disasters. If you want to know about what could go wrong, I can give you a long list of things that could go wrong if you don't think carefully about it. Only then you can then start with field trial, and again, I would say pilot field trial. I would go for a pilot before we as Andrea was saying, we contracept all wild boar of Italy, injecting them with Gonacon. And by the way, I would have liked to see the nun. I think in this case, we can ask people, why don't you show us how to do it? Yeah, great idea. Go and do it and show us how to do it, and then they will fail, of course. And then, can we deliver the contraceptive to the target species? The good news, and Sarah Beedham will talk about it later, is that we don't need the contraceptive to know whether we can deliver a bait, an oral bait, to a target species. We put a marker in a bait, and we will know whether we can target a particular proportion of animals. And it's nice that we can do this without contraceptive, because if we can't deliver to the right proportion, there's no point in doing it. And finally, and very important, does the population respond as predicted? So we want to monitor before and after to see whether what we predicted is happening. And we should always, always, always consider the fact that there might be alternative methods, and we should always think about fertility control as one of the tools. So it's not necessarily the only tool. It could be used together with other methods or as alternative to other methods. So just quickly, touching briefly, and then other people will expand on this, on delivering oral contraceptives. So this is an example where if you have a contraceptive, if you had a contraceptive, oral contraceptive for wild boar today, how on earth do you give it to wild boar and wild boar only? Because very often it's very likely that oral contraceptive, if ingested, let's say by a mammal, any mammal, will affect those mammals. So this is the example with the Botstiber operated system that we developed at the government organization where I was. These animals are feeding on plain bait, is sweet corn. Wild boar are not yellow on their nose, but there's a marker there, so we know that that animal has already fed from it. And this seems a very, very good system to deliver baits that will contain contraceptive. We tested this on in the Caribbean, in the UK, where we were very worried about badgers, in Italy, and in the US. In the US, we have bears that can feed from the boss, but apart from that, it's a very good system to deliver bait to wild boar and wild boar only. There are other methods. Some were developed by my group at the Central Science Laboratory that now has a different name, to selective feeders for parakeets, or also developed by some American colleagues. Sarah Beedham will talk about developing feeders for gray squirrels, and Russ Hill has a poster on baits for monkeys, in this case, for primates. It doesn't matter whether they are primates because the concept could be used for other species, for instance, for raccoons. And finally, targeting populations. We always have to think about targeting populations. These are a couple of work that two different groups did independently and reached the same conclusions. Add fertility control to feasible level of culling will reduce wild boar or pig population faster than culling alone. And very similar stories for the gray squirrel. So integrating two different methods gives a better outcome than using the traditional one. You would have seen these outside. These are each dot is a project on fertility control for wildlife in the world. And if you know of anybody working on this, please tell us. We would like all of you to become a dot on our map. And finally, my conclusion, the science underpinning fertility control for wildlife is moving forwards. It's not moving forwards in a straight line by any means. It's just zigzagging forwards. But we have new contraceptives, new delivery systems, new models, and new technologies. I'd love to talk to you if we had time about new technologies. But very, very important, we need evidence-based knowledge on all aspects of fertility control to apply it and to inform decisions. So thank you very much again.
I have a question. So when you're using the bait delivery systems in conjunction with culling, how do you figure out the sequence of what you do when to make the two complement each other?
Okay, so in case somebody didn't hear this, how do you integrate lethal and non-lethal control,
right.
Correct?
How does that sequencing work?
Yeah, okay, so for the squirrels and for the wild boar, if I remember correctly, you apply the traditional method to start. So you reduce the population to certain levels. That was for the squirrels. And then you continue with fertility control. You keep them down with fertility control. With the wild boar, we integrated the two so that the two are done together because we recognize that it's very, very difficult to cull more than 60–65% of the population. A lot of hunters never make it. So if you reduce the culling to maybe 40% and then you add the fertility control, you can achieve results faster than culling alone. And it could also be a good way to make people agree on a compromise between the traditional method and the novel one.
I'm losing my voice, I'm afraid. So a lot of these methods or drugs and things, I presume are prescription only. Do you have to have a vet involved, or is there a loophole for you to be able to prescribe and administer these products to these animals?
Thank you very much. That's a very important question. I always forget to mention this. As we said several times, many of these contraceptives in Europe are not available apart from nicarbazine. So typically you will import them under an experimental permit. So you can import it and use it. You don't necessarily need a vet, and also generally involving vets professionally for a routine use will make the cost skyrocket. Sorry, vets. Where are the vets? So ideally, you can have biologists. I've injected animals. I'm a biologist, provided that you have all the documents to be able to do it. So, and eventually, with the oral contraceptive, there will be a lot of volunteers, obviously trained, that are more than happy to put contraceptive in the boxes for gray squirrels, for instance.
So I just wanted to piggyback on, no pun intended there, on Larry's comment on how to combine approaches to get the most efficient outcome if you're trying to get the population down to what you've already identified as what might be an acceptable level with pigs. So that presentation by Dr. Beasley at VPC in Monterey this past year, he was talking about the difference between the effects that you get on population management when you're doing professional management versus just recreational, opportunistic hunting. And that depending on how it's done, the recreational hunting can actually be counterproductive to damage management because of the way it's done. And just wanted you to kind of just speak to that. Like, hunting isn't just, with respect to managing pig populations, and it may be different in Europe, but I don't think so because of their productivity, that depending on how you're conducting lethal methods, even if you're planning to combine it with fertility control, can have a huge difference in the outcome. It's not just about a body count, for instance, is what the takeaway message there was, that how you do it and how quickly you do it, and the methods that are used. So.
Yeah, so thank you, Stephanie. So the difference is also that in the States, feral pigs, feral swine, wild boar should not be there. They're not non-native, and they're reproducing at a rate higher than in Europe. So Stephanie is right, it really depends on, when we talk about culling, it could be managers or people paid to cull, which is happening in many countries now in Europe for African swine fever, and also costs a fortune. Or hunters, but the hunters we need to talk to hunters so that what they take out is not just the trophy males, which is typical, but they take out a significant proportion of the populations, including the reproductive females. So yes, there are a number of things. And again, we're talking about one species, but again, many species. That's why, hence the unicorns and the wind lemming. Different species are very different. So it's very difficult to make generalized statements about one. And that's hopefully what we will discuss tomorrow too.